Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks for coming to our presentation. We are from group 9. We'll discuss the material about poetic imagination as the spiritual and cultural powers. Before we head into the next session, allow me to introduce the theme. I am Dewi Setiyawati. Will explain about two classes of mental action between reason and imagination. Then Yovie Putra Suwanda will explain about the definition of poetry. And then Faris Zhafir will explain about twofold function of poetical power in poetry and the context of poetry as spiritual and cultural powers. The last is Riska Retno Sari will explain about the definition of poet. Okay, in this session I will try to explain about two classes of mental action between reason and imagination. Based on the book Introduction to Critism, page 170, it is stated that reason and imagination, the one is the making or the principle of synthesis and has for its object those forms which are common to universal nature and existence itself. The other is reasoning or principle of analysis, and its action regards the relation of things simply as relation, considering thought not in their integral unity but as the algebraical representation which conduct to certain general result. The reason is always reasoning or mentioned in the book. The enumeration of quantities already known. So basically this reason is more directed to logic through analytical method, and what is said by analyze is an attempt to divide or break or describe something into several parts, and then the result of reason can be a more scientific science, and the result obtained from based on experiment. The next is imagination is a perception of the value of those quantities. In this case, imagination means giving a value or giving a quality to the fraction or a part that was solved into a single unit. Imagination is the making. To obtain an imagination, a method is used, namely using a synthesis method based on a feeling, because basically what can only give an assessment is feeling. So the result of reason or logic is important, but the center of it all lies in imagination or feeling.
Hello, it's Yovie Putra Suwanda now, and I will explain about the various definitions of poetry according to Shelley. First one, Shelley defined a poetry to be the expressions of the imagination, and poetry is connected with the origin of man. Man is an instrument over which a series of external and internal impressions are driven, like the alternations of an ever-changing wind over an Aeolian lyre, which move it by their motion to ever-changing melody. According to Shelley's The Expression of the Imagination, It's apparently connected with the reason and imagination before. So the poetry was using a medium to express the results of human imaginations. But poetry using a language as its medium, because, according to Shelley, it relates directly to the human mind. Like Shelley said, for language is arbitrarily produced by the imagination and has relation to thoughts alone. After that, poetry linked with the origin of man itself, and poetry is connected with the origin of man. Man is an instrument over which a series of external and internal impressions are driven, like the alternation of an ever-changing wind over an Aeolian lyre, which move it by their motion to ever-changing melody. In my opinion, human has two instruments, so the human thought could be its internal instrument, while the human body is the external instrument. From the combination of instruments, it produces a harmony, which is possible in the form of poetry. And then Shelley also said a poem is the very image of life expressed in its eternal truth. And poetry is a mirror which makes beautiful that which is distorted. In my opinion, a poetry is a life image with the human imaginations, with the language as its medium, with combining the human instruments. Those are internal instrument and external instrument, and produce a harmony.
Alright, what is the twofold function? The function of poetical faculty are twofold. By one, it creates new material of knowledge and power and pleasure. By the other, of a gender in mind, a desire to produce and arrange them according to certain rhythm, an order which may be called the beauty and the good. So that harmony and unity are delighted in wherever they are found and incorporated instinctively into creative activities. Every man in the infancy of art observed an order which approximate more or less closely to that form which highly delighted result. This faculty or approximation enable the observer to experience the beauty by establishing a relation between the highest pleasure and the causes. Those who possess this faculty in excess of poet and their task is to communicate the pleasure to their experience to community. Poetry is strengthen the faculty which is an organ of the moral nature of man. Shelley believed that poetry strengthens the moral faculty and gives pleasure, so he treats imagination both as a creative and pragmatic aspect. That's at least what I can tell to all of you about the twofold function. Thank you.
What is poet? In the last week's material, we learned that romantic ideas position the poet as the center of knowledge himself. Although it is mentioned metaphorically. And now initially defends poetry. Explicitly, he mentioned that the poet has 4 rules. The first is the institutor of the law. The second is the founder of civil society. The third is the inventor of the art of life. The fourth is the teacher. It is found in the 173 page of the book in second paragraph. But poet or those who imagine and express this indestructible order are not only the author of language and of music, of dance, of architecture and statuary and painting. They are the institutor of law and the founder of civil society and the inventor of the art of life and the teacher who draw into a certain propinquity with the beautiful and the true. A poet essentially comprises and unites both these characters, for he not only beholds essentially the present as it is, and discover those laws according to which presenting ought to be ordered, but he beholds the future in the present. How great a poet is in the view of Romantic. From this, we can know that Romantic literary criticism is a literary criticism with an expressive approach, oriented toward the author. For the example, when we read the poem that we found a beautiful stanza, for a donation of Romantic, it not the word or a diction of stanza that are beautiful, but the poet who is great because he has good imagination. He is the author of other of the highest wisdom, pleasure, virtue, and glory. So he ought personally to be the happiness, the best, and the wisest, and the most illustration of man.
Alright, let's talk about the context of poetry as spiritual and cultural powers. In terms of spiritual, poetry is ever accompanied with pleasure, all spirit on which it fall upon themselves to receive the wisdom with it, be glad with its delight. And cultural, but let not be betrayed from a difference into critical history of poetry and its influence on society. Be it enough to leave poet out of effect of poets in the large and the true sense of the word, upon their own and all scanning times. So, for Shelley, he believed a poet's role is not to be all-encompassing in society. He stated that poets are not only authors of language and of music, of the dance and articulature, and statuary and painting. They are the institution of law, and the founder of civil society, and the inventory of the arts of life, and the teacher who draw into certain propinquity with the beauty and the true, that partial apprehension of the agencies of the invincible word with its called religion. No other English poet of the early 19th century to establish the connection between beauty and godness, or believe so vividly, so avidly in the power of art, consular pleasure, to improve society. Shelley was able to believe that poetry was make peoples and society better. His poetry is suffused with his kind of inspired moral optimism, which he hoped would affect his reader sincerely, spiritually, and morally, all at the same time.